War can mess with your headspace. Now, most of us in the military are familiar with post-traumatic stress and the terrible mental and emotional burdens borne by veterans around the world.
Ronnie, I still have bad dreams about my fallen brothers. But in this next incident, some Vietnamese soldiers were hearing the cries of their dead comrades while they were awake.
It was all part of an ingenious mind game devised by the Americans, and the question was,
what was behind the ghost sounds of the Vietnam War? February 10th, 1970, units of the North Vietnamese Army are deep in the jungles of Hao Nha province at the height of the Vietnam War. It's just after dusk when the NVA hear a series of spine-chilling sounds. Let's hear that again. These are the actual recordings, by the way. And it's not just moans, but words in Vietnamese. The voices sound like the wandering souls of dead NVA comrades killed on the battlefield.
If I was a 19-year-old communist soldier from the North, you've already got a lot of things to be scared as hell of. And then, what do you hear? The jungle is full of those sounds and voices that are speaking to you in your own language.
As the troops listen more intently, more sounds follow, banging gongs, sobbing women, and then a clue, an oddly specific suggestion. What was behind these ghostly sounds?
now, a lot of people believe that the jungles of Vietnam are haunted, especially considering that over 300,000 people are still unaccounted for just from the period of the Vietnam War. Rudy, you've spent time training people in Vietnam. What do you think about this?
I hate to say it, Ronnie, but there are aspects of these sounds that remind me of my experiences, both in and out of combat. This right here, that's straight out of the Psyops playbook.
You're right, it is. Our experts are going to tell you how it worked.
Superstition was a powerful weapon in the Vietnam War. In fact, both sides had their share of ghost stories.
There's a story involving American soldiers crawling down a tunnel to find the Viet Cong. But instead, they heard a female voice calling for them as they left. And there were also reports from soldiers of ghostly figures moving through trees and fanged creatures who would try to kidnap and eat troops while they were in the jungle.
But the true story of these voices was a closely guarded secret for years. It wasn't until 1969 when the first reports revealed to the public that the voices were actually part of a manipulative mixtape that was blasted across the countryside by American GIs. It was part of a Psyops mission, codenamed Operation Wandering Soul.
There was a recognition that people in Vietnam had religious beliefs and superstitions whereby the souls of dead people were wandering in the forests and in the jungles. The American military understood that that was a superstition that the enemy had and that maybe it would provide an upper hand in the battle space.
Former Green Beret and PSYOP specialist Mark Sauter says one ominous recording, which featured actors playing a deceased Viet Cong soldier and his grieving family, was a big hit.
Ghost tape number 10 was the most frightening and diabolical mixtape ever created. And it was created by the U.S. Army 6th PSYOPS Battalion.
When first deployed, Operation Wandering Soul exhibited its powers of persuasion. The audio actually caused enemy combatants to surrender. It even terrorized South Vietnamese troops and civilians alike.
In one case, an offshoot of Wandering Soul was playing the sounds of a tiger roaring near a Vietnamese position where a tiger had attacked a soldier. And according to veterans, this resulted in more than 100 of the enemy abandoning that position.
However, the psyop could only fool the enemy's ears for so long before they eventually tuned it out. By the early 1970s, Ghost Tape 10 and many of the recordings from the operation were put out of rotation. And as we know, whatever impact Operation Wandering Soul had on the North Vietnamese, it didn't scare them off from their goal of taking South Vietnam.
So, Rudy, what do you think about all this? It's a pretty original tactic, right?
It's clever, but in no way original. Back in the Philippine communist insurgency in the 50s, one U.S. advisor helped the Filipino military leverage the legend of a local vampire to instill sheer terror in the enemy. So making use of folklore for psyops is an established tactic.
Yeah, sometimes when war isn't scary enough, it helps to enlist the supernatural.